Okay, so here we go, a quick overview of functionalism and their views on the family. So just to recap functionalism of theory, first of all, it's a macro approach. So it looks at the whole of society and how institutions, in this case the family, shape ourselves and shape individuals. It's a consensus approach, so it's based on agreement that we share norms and values. These are taught to us through socialization, and in this case, primary SOC. And it's a structural theory. So they look at how family and key institutions are essential for helping society work. It's a top-down theory, how society shapes us. We have the organic analogy. So Durkheim talked about how we have a society of interrelated parts working together, and family is one of these parts. And we have functional approach. So ultimately, it is society benefits. It's functional, and the family helps this function to take place. The family obviously provides, in this case, as Merton refers to it, a manifest function. And lastly, this perspective does focus on traditional nuclear families, partially due to the period of time very early in the modern era when a majority of the research took place. So let's get on with our thinkers. So first of all, we have Murdoch. Now, Murdoch wrote in 1942, and he said that the family was universal. He looked at it was a universal institution. He said the family existed in over 250 societies, and according to Murdoch, the family generally functioned in the same way, performing 4 essential functions. The first of these was sexual regulation, so allowing adults to have regular, regulated, socially acceptable sexual interaction with one another. This would lead to reproduction, having children. You would then have to socialise those children into the norms and values of the society around them. And then there would also be the economic function. The family performed an economic role, raising workers and obviously providing for those families. Now, Murdoch is generally considered to be slightly outdated and slightly irrelevant, particularly because we live in a postmodern, in contemporary society, and a lot of these ideas are not necessarily always as relevant to today's society. Feminism also quite critical because, as I mentioned earlier, it does tend to focus on traditional nuclear families performing these roles. Now, next we have Parsons. Now, Parsons had quite a lot of stuff to say. So he argued that the family adapted to society around it. This was his theory of functional fit, and it adapted to the needs of industrial society. So we saw the change from large extended families living in rural areas to traditional nuclear families. Now, these families, because they were small, because they were nuclear, because they'd functionally fit to the society around them, they were geographically mobile. There was greater social mobility for these families to move up and down the class system. A status was achieved rather than ascribed, so you earn your status rather than being born into a status, and structural differentiation took place. The family lost a number of its key roles, such as education, healthcare, religion, law and order. These were taken over by other institutions like education, schools, police, hospitals. The family was left with 2 essential or irreducible functions that no one else could perform, and that being primary SOC, or primary socialization, and the stabilization of adult personalities, or SOAP. SOAP and the stabilization of adult personalities is achieved through the warm bath theory, in which the family, and particularly women, perform this role of acting like a warm bath, calming and de-stressing adults and balancing their personalities. Now, again, as feminism was unhappy with Murdoch, feminism isn't happy with Parsons' view that women have this role, and Ansley, a Marxist feminist, talks about particularly this role as women being the takers of shit. Men talk about the instrumental role. So men have the instrumental role, women have the expressive role. And lastly, Wilmot and Young. So Wilmot and Young, slightly more contemporary, 1972. They focus on changes in the family, particularly the structure of the family following industrialisation. They agreed with Parsons that the family had become smaller, privatised and nuclear, but what they found was actually, they said that the family moving away from traditional nuclear family roles and gender roles to more symmetrical families, where men and women would share work role, domestic work, childcare. Now, this is obviously fits in with March of Progress views. It sort of highlights egalitarian roles in the family, and that conjugal roles or housework roles were joined and shared as part of the symmetrical rather than segregated. This was attributed to changes in the role of women, geographical mobility, new technology and labour-saving devices, and higher standards of living. And there we go, functionalism recapped in just under 5 minutes.